here we are in the weekly support meeting. I have a weekly support meeting. I hold a weekly support meeting at 7 a.m. Pacific time every Saturday morning. And that's for people who I'm working with or who are out there in the world working really on the deep somatic level and needing support with that. So people generally who have strong body contractions or trauma held in the body, physical pain, or just emotional repression. Generally anything that falls under the umbrella of um, somatic work with the Kiloby inquiries. That's what I'm supporting people on. This morning, it is Saturday today, and woke up at 7 a.m. or actually woke up about 2 o'clock last night, and my little chihuahua was just not acting right. And I thought that at first it was a stroke because he was kind of showing some of the signs that I've seen before in dogs with strokes. Um, but when we got to the vet, it sounds like it's toxicity of some kind. So I've already felt a lot of emotions this morning, speaking of somatic work. When a situation like that happens, I just stay in my body, stay awake to the feelings that are coming through. I've had a lot of people die around me, actually, and animals, and that way of grieving has always been the best for me, is just to feel directly, which is kind of interesting because in the somatic weekly workshops, which, by the way, I'm just going on YouTube Live because I wasn't able to do that meeting this morning, and I've invited the people that normally go to those meetings to come and show up this morning. So I'll probably be online for a while, giving those people a chance to talk and ask questions about somatic work. It's 9:47 Central Time, so I have to go at about 11 Central Time to do an interview. So I'm just going to sit on here for a while and probably not have a ton to say because this again is like the live version of the weekly call. And the weekly call, a lot of it is I feed off of the questions or the comments from the audience. And yes, I have my fingernails painted. So those questions will come in. Just me and Chester having fun, really. Just love expressing myself. And then speaking of all the repression work that we do in here, it's been amazing because I did the repression work to deal with my physical pain, as I've said. But the benefits of it all around are amazing. Just like an even deeper sense of freedom around expressing and being myself, just showing up unapologetically, however that is. Like this morning, going to the vet, just crying like a little baby. And that's what life is about now, is authenticity. So if it makes me feel authentic to paint my nails or get more tattoos or whatever it is I want to do, I'm probably going to do it. Just waiting for questions and comments from any of you guys that you're going to start coming in now from the call. Can you please keep the subtitles? That's the first question. I have to tell you that I'm not good with YouTube. So there's probably a very easy way to keep the subtitles, and I don't want to bore everybody here, but I'm going to work on that. Let's say that. I'm going to talk to my people that work with me, and it'll be an easy fix. So that's a promise. Anybody else have anything? And what we're talking about in these meetings, and by the way, if you like what we're talking about today and you need support, come to the weekly meetings. If you go into Scott Kiloby Facebook Live page, you'll see usually on every Friday, I'll post a link to the Saturday morning meeting. You click on the link, you can either make a donation or not. It doesn't matter whether you donate money. Everyone's welcome. Nobody's turned away. All right, let's see. I'm just waiting for a question. Until then, I might speak about a few things. Grieving, speaking of my dog, grief is a whole thing. We've been talking about in these weekly meetings, and for those of you who are been watching my Facebook Live videos, we've been talking about how the Killaby inquiries have been developed in a way that helps us access the deeper unconscious, repressed layers of stuff in the somatic. True story. We have developed and refined some tools, my friends, that are quite powerful. And so the questions like on things like grief, that hasn't come up yet in our weekly meetings, but grief can be like anything. Having done this work this long, I have a sense now that it doesn't matter what the emotion is or the state, we can easily not process it and, just hide it away from ourselves. You say suppress, repress, compartmentalize. And we do it with everything, and we certainly do it with grief. I was feeling grief as I was going to the vet this morning, and it's just how my body deals with it. It's like because it looked like my dog had a stroke. I've lost animals, so just some old stuff came up, and then with this Chihuahua, I have this incredibly strong bond. And Tesca, I'll tell you about the dog in a second. Thank you. I'll give you an update. But just the waves of grief coming through this morning, it reminded me of people that had passed and dogs that had passed and how I processed that. So that hasn't come up. So I'll just say briefly, don't treat it as anything different. If the grief wasn't processed at the time of somebody's passing or something, chances are you don't even recognize it as grief. Now you might have little moments where you have the memory of the person or the animal and you start crying, like a little bit of emotion gets released. But grief that's not processed easily sort of crystallizes and kind of hardens into, guess what? Body contraction and chronic pain. How do I know this? Just working with literally thousands of people through the years. If the grief is old and hasn't been processed and it's showing up as like a repressed thing, like in a physical pain or a body contraction, you can get that to start coming up by feeling into it and saying, I want to feel the grief. So you're feeling into the area that's contracted or painful and pull up the person that you've lost or the animal and just say, um, I want to feel the grief in here, meaning in that area. And if you're looking at the person and you're feeling into the area, if there's any repression of the grief, you should get I don't want to feel it. If you're really quiet, and if you get that, stay into that inquiry until it turns into I want to feel it, which means you could be there for a long time. But it's like striking gold because if you can tap into the grief that's repressed in there, that body contraction can diminish or fall away, which in and of itself feels good, but the grieving process itself can pick back up because once the energy is released, you'll see some of the words and pictures and feelings that you didn't process at that time. So that's if grief was not processed, but a situation like with my dog this morning, or like a friend, or when my mother died, it's very sudden. And for me, like how I'm processing that while it's happening is so important so that it doesn't become body contraction, which again takes me back to waves of grief coming up and just feeling them staying in the somatic and just feeling the waves moving through. If someone isn't allowing that to happen, I'll take them into inquiry around different layers of around the loss. Like sometimes they're angry. So we'll bring up the anger through Killaby inquiries to see it and let it go. And then the guilt, because oftentimes there's a layer of guilt when someone passes, and that kind of has to be dealt with separately. And then we get to the grief. Oh, and to answer your question, Tesca, so we don't think it was a stroke. The vet thinks it's toxicity, and this Chihuahua, we went for a long walk in Wichita Old Town last night, and Old Town is a place where everybody parties, the college kids and everything, and they're throwing things on the ground. And it could be that he picked something up and ate it, or he was in our apartment for a while yesterday alone. Who knows? But just sort of out of it and disoriented. But the doctor said take half a Benadryl, not for me, like not for my grief, but for the dog. And so the half Benadryl just knocked him out, which is I think what he needs right now. So he's sleeping right here. All right, back to the topic of our bodies, our contracted, painful bodies, and how to wake that up, uproot that, transmute, transform the body. Yes, I hope he transmutes it. I think he will. Right before he went to bed, he was showing signs of back to the old Oliver. Just small signs, so we'll see. So now it's about 5 till 10. So this is about the time when the people, I told the folks in our weekly call meeting that, I would get on here at 10 o'clock. I came a little early. So maybe some of them will come in here. But any of you in here already, let's just treat this as a weekly meeting, even though we normally do it privately. This will be public. Remember that. So anything you share, someone could see it later. So don't share anything that you don't want shared. At the same time, I hope you'll feel free to dialogue with me and bring up some things to talk about. Don't make me play guitar again. I played guitar in yesterday's video, but I don't have the guitar with me. I mean, I'll just say some things, but I really want to hear from you guys. Lately, I was trying to, or yesterday in the video, I was trying to say, when we, there's a question, hold on. I have a quad that goes numb. Quad? Tesca, you're making me look up words. I know what that word means, but I have to double check here. Quadriceps, right? So one of your muscles. When you stand up, it gets stiff. When you sit down, it doesn't. That goes numb if I stand for 30 minutes. That's one of those things, Tesca, where, of course, Western medicine is really potentially the authority on this. Keep going to the doctor if you're already going to the doctor on that. Nothing that I say should change that. I'm not a doctor. I can't all that stuff first. But if it were happening to me, I would probably go to the doctor or somewhere, but I would also start to investigate just in case this is something emotional or psychological. There's some science out there that says that our emotional system and our immune system literally mirror each other, which is fascinating. They mirror each other, which means when something happens in one of them, it happens in the other. There's also some research regarding just inflammation of muscles and stuff and how the emotional system directly affects that inflammation. Numbness, I mean, who knows what that is? I'm not saying it's either one of those things. I'm just saying that, well, here's what I'm ultimately saying. You don't really know what is at the root of something like that. You can't guess at that until you do a little test. So Tesca, why don't we do a little test with it? It's making me more scared of being out and about. Right, because if your leg goes numb and you're out and about, it could be dangerous or whatever else. I don't want you to put yourself in any position that's dangerous right now. But if at some point, if you stand up and you have a good footing and it goes numb, if and when the numb sensation is there, just to do a little bit of test is feel into it, which is kind of funny to say because it's numb, but numbness is still a sensation that you sense, you being awareness. So just sensing it, being aware of it, feeling into it and around it, and then just ask, who or what is this about? Be really quiet, and if anything flashes up in that, Tesca, there's your entry point into inquiry. It happens very slowly over 10 minutes, she says. So again, we might not be able to access it right now, but Tesca, I don't mind answering that question in email. I think you have my email address, and you and I have talked before. So at some point, if you just want to stand up in a safe way and feel into it when it's numb and ask who or what is it about, and then just write down. I mean, you could obviously go into inquiry there if you know, but write down who or what it's about and discern as much as you can about that. Send me an email and maybe I can give you some ideas about. Okay, good. There's no danger in falling. if I can give you some ideas once I know the who or the what. But if you feel into it several times and ask who or what is this about and you don't get anything, could be that it's not psychological, emotional. A session with somebody would probably be best, someone who is really good at mining out unconscious things from sensations. Anyone on my site, if you go to killaby.com, this is for everybody, killaby.com, and you go to um, find a facilitator or the place where you sign up for sessions, the ones that are qualified to work with repression and chronic pain and body contractions, meaning the facilitators who have come alongside me as I've developed this and have gone deep on their own, they're marked off on that site, qualified to work in that somatic area in the way that I talk about it here. So again, Tusky, if you want to just try a session with somebody, if you can't access it, try to access it on your own first. And then let's talk about what comes up. So now, just to remind you guys, I'm waiting on people to come in and talk. This is the version of our weekly live meeting. So I'll go back into sort of the usual YouTube talk, but I did want to make this interactive. So if there's anything you want to say, remembering that this will not be confidential. This will go on YouTube this week. So you want to fashion your questions accordingly. What I was trying to say yesterday about this is that once we stop believing that the mind and body are separate, because we have to get over some of that conditioning, that because our whole Western medicine model treats the body as separate, and our psychiatric model treats the mind as separate, and most of therapy in a way kind of does treat the mind as separate, as if you can just treat the mind independently or treat body independently. Well, those of us in the know, because we're experientialists who've been meditating or inquiring for years, we know that the mind and body is connected, because when we feel something in the body, we discover programs, thoughts connected to it. So I think one of the part of the lack of skillfulness that we've all experienced is due to this mind-body split. And so when we come to the spiritual teachings, the awareness-based teachings, the inquiries, we may still be splitting that. And so this is really hard to explain, but in, for example, non-duality, we're told you're not your thoughts. So we witness the thoughts and we see that's not me, that's not me, that's not me. I'm the awareness to which that's appearing. Follow me? Then when it comes to the body, though, because of sometimes we have this belief of the mind and body being separate, when sensations show up, we may not realize how we automatically assume the physicality of those. So even tightness, we might say, oh, that's the muscles in there, that's physical. And we might then get busy with treatments and exercises and modalities that treat the body as separate and treat this as a physical thing. Nothing wrong with that, because most of those exercises are, even Dr. Sarno said, yoga, back inversion, all these things that people do physically for their bodies is healthy. But he said if it's emotional and psychological, the physical movement and the physical treatments aren't going to get at it. And many of these things we would not go to the doctor for these sensations. So you might go to the doctor for a chronic pain situation, but I mean, do you really go to the doctor for a contracted heart or a stomach that's clenched because you believe you're not good enough? It's not really what doctors treat. So what I'm saying is, it's like you have to become the authority of your own experience, the master of your own experience, to start listening to what the body is telling you. Because once you no longer think of the mind and body as separate, you can start tuning in and listening, feeling into certain sensations and asking pointed, skillful questions that will pull up the mind connection, where the mind and body are connected right there. So there's a bit of a switch It's like its own kind of shift. As we're doing these awareness practices, it becomes not just about resting as awareness, but about intuiting and being sensitive to the sensations and the emotions in the body, and then learning how to skillfully bring that up. So when you do that, it's like you become like a master of your own experience, even though there's no master here, there's no self here. Ultimately, it's the awareness. But in that recognition, when you're tuning into the body, you're literally skillfully pulling up the mind body connection. Regardless of whether your doctor gets it or your psychiatrist, in your direct experience, you start to see it. So when I asked Teska, when I invited Teska to feel into the numbness in the legs, that's an example of how, if that's something physical, then her doctor or somebody in that profession would deal with it. But what we know about the body is that it carries a lot of data that is psychological and emotional. So when I had her feel into the numbness, and I had her say, who or what is this about? See, what we're doing there is we're listening to the body. She's feeling in and listening and asking a question that might elicit who or what is this about, which is the mind. And then if she finds things there, who or what is this about, she can inquire into that, see through it. It dissolves the programs. And then as the programs dissolve, because they're connected to the body, here, the numbness should transform if there's a connection like that. Meaning it may turn into actual sensation and not numbness. It may turn into something else, but um, once you start skillfully working with something like that, it tends to transform. Sometimes when people, I'm just going to keep talking until I hear people asking questions or engaging with me here. Okay, Teska just mentioned something else, and I'm just going to come back to that in a second. I kind of lost my thought there. Anyway, let me go back to what Teska said. Maybe my thought will come back here. Well, one thought I had is this. This is why I'm always saying that resting in awareness is not enough. I'm just trying to bring that topic back up because it sounds a bit controversial, but resting in awareness is not enough. And the reason is because, again, the body keeps the score. We know that from, see, these enlightenment teachings that started like several thousand years ago just have not, being trauma informed happened after that. Science happened after that. So all the insights of science and trauma research aren't necessarily incorporated into the non-dual teachings. So when the teachings say rest is awareness, they're not tuned in exactly to what we've learned. Well, not all of them, because some of the Eastern practices, like traditional Advaita, is very tuned in to clearing out the body. But some of the teachings out there that don't involve that embodiment process will say rest as awareness. Now, think about this. Teska's case. She's resting as awareness, but all that shows up is numbness. It's like for me, for a couple of years when I was resting with the pain, none of the programming showed up by resting as awareness. What showed up was pain. This is why resting as awareness isn't enough, because the programs are unconscious. So they're repressed. They won't show themselves to you without skillful inquiry or without something to prompt them up. Are you catching on to why I keep saying resting as awareness is not enough? If you're sitting there right now with a pain or a body contraction, and as you rest in awareness, nothing really happens with it, it doesn't diminish or resolve itself like other things, and you get a sense that there's some stories connected to it, but you can't really see it all, and in not seeing it all, again, the contraction remains. That's what I mean by resting as awareness isn't enough. Right there. If that's your experience, I'm speaking to you. Yeah. It's an integral part of it. Like I need that foundation of awareness to be awake to what shows up when I inquire, but resting by itself, again, didn't show you anything, Tesca, as you can see, on the numbness, just like it didn't show me anything on the pain. So it's really important to say this because people can suffer unnecessarily longer than they have to if their practice is resting as awareness and they're not getting underneath or seeing into what creates a numbness or a pain or a contraction. That's suffering that doesn't have to happen now that we have tools that are very somatic based that can discover these hidden programs. At this point now, we really don't have to suffer. Like we may have had to suffer before when we didn't know how to bring that up skillfully, but we don't anymore. Which is not to say it's an easy process. It comes with its challenges, but it does work. Right, the cause of the manifestation hides unless I really go looking for it. That's what Tesca said. It's exactly what I experience, not only with myself, but pretty much everybody all over the world. If I don't ask questions, it's going to hide because that's one of its functions. These traumas and these programs that we repressed, one of their functions is to remain repressed because that's what's protected us all these years. That's what allowed us to repress the emotion to protect ourselves. So, yeah, I'm not going to show up just because we're sitting on a meditation mat or looking from awareness, our true nature. All right, here's something from someone else. I apologize for um, having to squint and look at these, but YouTube doesn't keep them up. Oh, treating pain that is not, yeah, I have sciatica, which isn't painful when I sit down and inquire, but to walk, right? I've worked with people with sciatica. I sit down and inquire, but to walk only a short distance. So this question is speaking to sciatica, which is like for a lot of people, it's like a lightning bolt pain that moves down a leg, so it's not constant. I don't know if that's what you're experiencing, is like that jolt. So it's not constant. That would be really painful if it were. For some people, it can get constant. But the thing is if you can feel into the area where that happens, into that leg, especially during a time when it's active, and then just start asking the questions like, who or what is this about? So I don't know where the sciatica starts or begins with just feeling into that whole area, even if there isn't that jolting pain right now, and starting the inquiry. Like, who or what is this about? Just to get started. And yeah, it says it's due to a compressed nerve. Right. But remembering that all the doctors they all tell us this. They all give us a diagnosis. And what I say is continue going to the doctor because we don't know the nature of your injury, but the doctors tell us this, but then that doesn't get to the question of whether there's some psychological, emotional stuff there, stress, trauma, emotional repression. So feeling into that area and just saying, who or what is this about? If you get something or someone, chances are that at least some element of your pain is emotional and psychological. Why else would you be getting a who or a what on a pinched nerve? Like, what would a pinched nerve? Unless, of course, you're just stressed out about someone, right? And then that makes it worse. But in any event, if you find stress or if you find trauma or buried anger or whatever, that's worth exploring. Now, when you do that and you get a who or a what, then you go deeper into inquiry. So, not knowing what you discovered there, I can't guide you through it. But if I just simulate it here for a second. So, imagine I have sciatica. I'm feeling into that area and I say, who or what is this about? And then all of a sudden, dad flashes up and then leaves. So, treat that as significant. There's a reason. Like that image did not just pop up for no reason. It's not happening in a vacuum. It's connected to probably quite a few other things, but it's just showing you like one image, like dad, or words, or a concept. So you have to tweak that out, pull that up more. So if dad comes up, ask, what am I believing here in this relationship with dad? Or what does his image mean about me, to get the words? Once you get words about what it's about, you can reverse those words, because that's what's going to show you the connections, the stuff that you can't see. So here's Dad. So I bring that back up because it feels connected to that area in the leg. And then I ask, what am I believing here? And what comes up is, this is the example I always get, he was disappointed in me. That might be something different than what you have, but the point is you reverse that. So looking at Dad, feeling into the leg, he was never disappointed in me. And by reversing it, it provokes the ego, the unconscious ego, to show itself all of its cards that prove that Dad was disappointed. And then you can just witness from awareness. The idea being is that you've pulled up some story or program connected to the sciatica. So you want to stay with that and witness everything it has to show you, letting each thought come to rest between thoughts, and repeat until you don't get anything on that. And then repeat the whole process again. Because even if you work out the disappointment issue with that, there could be other things tied to it. So I've talked about the litmus test for repression. Because of now what we know about the science, we don't want to skip over the possibility of emotional repression being part of the culprit. Dr. Sarno said that sciatica, a lot of the times his sciatica patients had repressed anger, repressed fear. Okay, so that's just it if it's purely physical. So the only thing I have to say is run through the test, because I used to think it was physical too. That's just it. Remember, I'm talking about the mind-body connection. So we lean towards believing it's physical because we have all these doctors who, by the way, aren't aware of the new research, many of them, because the new research says that many of these things that were thought to be physical, including sciatica, can indeed be emotional or psychological. So I would do the test and really see if there's something there, because if there is something in there that's emotional or psychological, by treating it as a physical thing, you'll miss all of that. And to miss all of that could be a big miss if that's at the root of your pain. Go through the repression inquiries by pulling up Mom and Dad, feeling into that area of the leg and saying, oh, not easy to track you? Not easy to track you. Well, okay. I'm not sure what that means. Let me finish this. So as you're feeling that area of the leg, looking at Mom and Dad, I could feel and show anger to them. Listen for the response. If you get a no, possible anger repression. Check that box. Look at Mom and Dad, feel into the leg. I could feel and show fear to them. If there's a no, check that box. I don't have to hold back. I didn't have to hold back love and affection to them. Yes, I did. Check that box. If you check any of those boxes, I would be going down those inquiries, because there's some indication there that there's some repression involved in that area. Be interested, wouldn't you, to know what that's about? Let's see. Trying to read Serena's question. I see. Could you please talk about it, how to inquire into this? Let's see here. So yesterday I started to ask questions and put statements into my space like there's no residue of sedatives in my system. Oh, I see. So inquiries about having the residue of drugs in your system. Yeah, I mean, I think you're already onto this. Like you said, there is no residue of sedatives in my system. That's a reverse inquiry. The idea here is the chances of there being, I don't know the science behind this, of there being residual in your system, but it's more about what you're believing. So if you believe there's residue in the system, how that can play on your mental health. You've got the inquiry already, Serena. It's like there is no residue in my system. What do I get out of believing that there's residue in my system? This is how I protect myself. so on and so forth. Just stick with those questions for now, because I can't think of anything more direct, because the belief is that there's residue of medicine in your system. I have a friend who shot up drugs in his arm a lot, and then he quit. And for months after, he had the story that there were needles broken off in there, even though I don't think x-ray showed anything, and also that the drug was stuck in his arm. And that played on him. So to do a little inquiry is to lift that story. But the point being is that sometimes medical attention is needed, because I don't know what you're referring to. And I would, would not have wanted to say to my friend, excuse me, I would not have said to my friend, don't go to the doctor, go check that out, continue in that inquiry. Chances are there's just layers to that belief. Serena, it's not like a different inquiry would necessarily be better. Is, as you say, to go deeper on that one inquiry. All right. Tesca mentioned that the hardest physical manifestation is obesity, and that the numbness showed up. That's interesting. The numbness showed up after she gained some weight. Well, this is an example, I think, of how the psychological gets intersected with the physical. And there might be some work to do on just the obesity, the beliefs that you have, the self limiting beliefs, the deficiency stories around weight or whatever that is. Might want to do some work on that. And I think you know how to do that because you've been around the work and you're not asking me to explain it. But basically, anything that you believe, feel into the area where you're holding the energy of that belief, reverse the belief, and watch. It is that simple. Right, and then back to Tremaine. Again, I just want to remind you that many people start off with the assumption that something is physical, and it could be, but do look into that. Do look into that, because if it's emotional or psychological, you could find that there's a way to clear that. But if you don't ever discover that and you land solidly on its physical, your whole consciousness might just block yourself from going there. And it did me for 2 years during chronic pain. And this is someone who develops inquiries. And I inquire quite freely on things, but still there was a bit of a block. So I had like 3 doctors and 2 surgeons telling me that my pain was because of the physical abnormality in my spine, and they were all wrong. How could they all be wrong? It's just very simple. They're not following the science of the last 10 years. So they're still in the old science, which basically says if there's an abnormality or a physical injury, that's always the cause of the pain. They'll say, at the most, the old school will say stress makes it worse. The new science says something totally different. It says that emotional repression, other emotional issues, including trauma, can actually be a major contributing factor to having the thing, to having the pain itself. That's a big difference. And some of the doctors that we go to these days, just they don't have time, I guess, or something, to pay attention to how science is changing. They're not stopping to pay attention, or old tricks die hard. Say it that way. This whole movement may have to be driven by patients. Patients may have to take responsibility for their own emotional and psychological suffering, and then as they do inquiry and release these repressions and they start to get better, may have to go back to the doctor and explain that until doctors are educated about this. Yeah, but it came from an injury. So the fact that it came from an injury, Dr. Sarno says that that in and of itself isn't enough to say that it's physical. Um, if there's a traumatic injury, he said sometimes it could be physical, but he said even with injuries, over time the chronic pain signal has more to do with repressions or emotions that you've repressed, things that are not resolved if it's chronic in nature. So There's no way that I can tell you. You can see what I'm saying is just continue going to the doctor and maybe be open to this inquiry to see what's there. All right. Just wait to see if you guys have anything else. Oh, here's something from Fergus. Thanks, Fergus. Hey, Scott, I feel like um, the message dies on me. I feel like I'm only realizing how much pain and discomfort I've been all my life. Like it's now at the front of awareness, and so it seems new, but it's always been there. I can relate to that. Um, After the awakening experience, Fergus, I became aware of my inner body more than ever. And that's where I encountered all the shame, the body contractions that I cleared over time, and the physical pain. In some ways, the recognition of awareness is like a big flashlight, and it's just like whatever pain is there or unconsciousness, it starts to shine on that, and it can really bring it up. But in bringing it up, we're able to deal with it. How can we see through something that we can't see? So the fact that there's more discomfort there allows us to experience it and see it so that we can move through it. If we can't see it, if it's not coming up, we don't have a shot. So Fergus, if you can see that as like an opportunity, even though it's very uncomfortable, this is the only way that you would be able to see through this is if you could actually feel it and experience it and dig deeper with it. Right. And by the way, we're talking about addiction, and the science is also saying and has been saying for quite some time that emotional repression is also a driver for addiction. Quite a lot of studies on that. So all this stuff is connected. Can you see, guys? It's not a coincidence that we end up talking about these topics in one meeting about repression. You guys are actually showing evidence. You're presenting evidence here in the meeting that if you've got a contracted body, you may also have addictions. For example, if you have a contracted body, you see what I mean, the connections. And then science says it's all connected. So just think to pay attention to that. With DID, I know that the mind can make the body blind or sighted depending on which alter is active, right? Which alter the personality is active. DID is essentially multiple personality disorder. There is a published research paper about this happening in Germany. Dissociative identity disorder is normally something that we encourage people to work with a therapist also who's trained and skilled in that particular thing because like she said, some of the memories and the feelings are very repressed, especially if it's like pre-verbal trauma, and it's so more difficult to access. And so you can definitely benefit from this work, but there's also a lot of specialty there, or not a lot, but a few specialty therapies around that that are good, where you integrate that with what we're doing here because of the challenges with that really repressed stuff. As she says, it makes the body blind. Here's another question. Keep changing the shade of my picture. You often say the response to an inquiry is words coming up. Can you talk about how these reactions to inquiries have other forms than words, visual things? Think about this. Let's just say if I'm inquiring into the feeling of being unlovable, and I reverse that, and I'm looking at my mom and dad or something, unlovable. So let's talk about images first because it doesn't always come in words. But an image by itself, let's say a picture of my dad comes up. Now imagine that you just find this picture of my dad somewhere and it's a benign photo. When there's no words to it, there's no narrative, it just looks like there's an old man in the picture. But as soon as the picture means something personal to us, we become more identified with it. So the key is to see the hidden words on images that pop up. So let's say dad's photo comes up in response to I'm lovable. The question is to find out, what is his image actually saying? What does dad's image mean about me? Oh, he didn't love me. Find the words, if you can, that go with pictures because the words are what gives it such meaning to our consciousness. Observe words more than anything else. But what she's saying is that sometimes they're just mental impressions or things that appear that don't form themselves into full thoughts. The thing is even if you're getting an impression, you may not know exactly what the impression or the fragment is or what it means until you ask. So you can obviously just observe these images or these impressions or whatever they are and let them be, and that's a good thing. But the point is, this is deprogramming. So discern what the program is. The deprogram is on mainly on the words, the programming of the words in your mind of what you believe. So if some mental impression comes up, it's very esoteric or you don't know what it is, just say, okay, what does this mean about me? Then here come the words. See that? Otherwise, it's like operating blindly because these things pop up and you don't quite see how they're connected because they're still partly unconscious, the words. Even mental impressions like a dark mass has words connected to it because nothing happens in a vacuum. Remember that. So let's say something comes up that's just very amorphous or it's not a picture or a word. That's not coming up for no reason. Everything is connected. So ask, what does it mean about you? And you'll start to see some of the connections. And you can witness those words. If there's no words on it, just let it be. Huh, interesting. Teska's doing KI in her therapy sessions with her therapist. And it helps us both. That's cute. Yeah. Visual things. I just answered that. When visual things come up, whether they're images that you can clearly see or just something more enigmatic, ask, what are the words that go with it? And that'll take you deeper. Yeah. Okay, good. No other questions here. Just give you guys a few more minutes. Say anything else you want to say? It's like your body is a universe in and of itself. But if you don't know how to navigate that, you can get lost in it. And you're at the mercy of it then. So this is all about having skill as you navigate that, to know where to go in that universe, to see what you need to see. And that's what brings the relief. Is there a KI facilitator who specializes in obesity? There's a few of them that do. Um, if you can email me, Teskin, you know my email, kilobecenter@gmail.com. How do I recognize to start this inquiry? The inquiry that we're starting with is we're talking about somatic based stuff. So there's something in your body, we're pointing to something in the body that feels tight or contracted or painful, where you're holding energy. So you would start the inquiry to discover whether there's something psychological and emotional repressed in that area. So you would feel into that area and just ask who or what is this about? And if something comes up, chances are it's not just a physical thing. That's the mental material coming up. And from there, you can jump into the Kilby inquiries. Here's the thing though, even if nothing comes up, remember that we're talking about repression. So it could be that it's cunningly hiding from you And there are ways to bring that up, but you may want to work with a facilitator who can help you with that if you're not getting anything, but you sense that there's something there. And then Fergus says, I have a huge block in my life around work, jobs, a huge fear of having one, and a huge fear of not having one. Right? I hear this a lot, especially not having money to invest in inquiry facilitation to go deeper. Money thing, I always recommend some regular inquiry on that until you unhook from it. But some of the inquiries around money are, I'll always have enough money. That should bring up the thoughts and feelings of fear, anxiety that are hiding. Just witness those. I'll always have enough money. And you can turn that around and say, I'll be fine even if I have no money. If I'm broke, everything will still be fine. And that'll bring up the fears and insecurities. You might want to look also at sabotage. So basically, if there's an operating deficiency story, if there's an active deficiency story in your life, like I'm not good enough, that easily translates to sabotage in the area of like money. So as you envision the future around money, the belief here is that there's someone here who's not good enough. So then that false self is going to be looking to confirm itself because it wants to survive. That's how it sabotages. By seeing things in the world and seeing the future and seeing more let down, more not good enough. So you can then envision yourself making money if you want, and then just saying nothing stands in the way of that. And then here come the self-sabotaging thoughts for you to witness. Nothing stands in the way of that. Observe each thing from awareness. Let each one be there fully as it falls away. Same thing as always. Stuck in this big system. Yes, it does feel like that sometimes, Victoria, that we're stuck in a big system. It's like it feels like there's no way out of it. But the way out of it is to look from awareness to see that the system is just data. The system, when we treat it as real and we reify it, we feel like we're really trapped in it. It all feels very real. But once you start looking from awareness, you see that what you're calling a system is really these programs that are coming across, especially the ones that are connected to the body that make it all seem very real. So as you're resting as awareness, you're dissolving this system by seeing that it is just that. During times of being in awareness and inquiry, you'll go back into believing it's real. And we kind of have to do that in order to see again what we're believing. So staying in inquiry just pulls you out of the believability of the system. So I don't really believe I'm living in a system anymore. But I can see where that comes from if one is ruled by their programs, because the programs are all about separation, deficiency, trauma, fear, all that stuff. Yeah. Victoria says it's like the Matrix. Yeah, I guess you could use that. People use that metaphor. I'll just leave you with this. When you recognize that you're sort of in a system and it feels like you're kind of trapped there and it feels very real, that system is how you're going to wake up, though. You see, if you weren't trapped in this system to begin with, you would not even be interested in liberation. It's the fact of your bondage that makes you interested in that. So everybody that I've ever seen wake up, they wake up through that aspect of their system that they're believing. So people with addictions, they wake up through that prison. Depression becomes the doorway to freedom for people with depression. Whatever it is for you, trauma becomes the doorway in because that's your bondage. So if you can treat it like an opportunity, even though it's painful, every time you get triggered within the system, it's an opportunity to see again what's happening. That the data is coming and going to awareness and you're buying into it. Okay, guys, I have to go pretty soon to an interview. So it's good being with you. And so next Saturday and every Saturday until I say otherwise, and anyone can come to our weekly support meeting. go on Friday to my Facebook page, find the link, or find the link to get the link for the meeting, and then 7 a.m. Pacific every Saturday morning. But if you're going to come, please have some familiarity with this work, especially the somatic part of it. Get the Kyo series or watch enough videos where you know what I'm talking about, because this is a new dimension of inquiry. And if you show up in the meetings, you might feel like you're kind of way behind. So just learning a little bit of what we're doing first before you come into the meetings would help you and everybody else so that we can carry the conversation forward. Thanks, guys.